Hello, welcome to Stronger in the Difficult Places. I'm your host, Dr. Zoe, and today we're talking to my guest, Rebecca Mullen. We're talking about 6 steps to better marriage communication, which is also the title of her book. Rebecca is an artist. She's a writer, a TEDx speaker, and a certified coach. She has helped hundreds of couples navigate conflict, improve communication, reignite the spark in their relationships. Her approach is rooted in compassion and authenticity, creating a safe space for couples to explore and address their concerns. Rebecca is also a my personal and business coach. She has been, at least. I need to make an appointment with her again. She's been on this podcast before. I absolutely adore her. And so I'm very excited to talk about 6 steps to better marriage communication. She has a story that really makes her qualified to write this book. Listen in. Rebecca, I always say I'm thrilled to have a guest, but I'm especially thrilled to have you here today. Um, I think I might have said it in the intro, but you have been on my podcast before in a really meaningful episode for me. You interviewed me about my divorce. And I also let everybody know that you have been my personal and business coach. I absolutely adore you. And I'm so happy for your book coming out, 6 Steps to Better Marriage Communication. And I'm thankful that you can share some of your wisdom with my audience today.
I am thrilled to be here. I adore you. I
Oh.
adore your work and just the way that you approach everything when it comes to taking ownership for what is our part of the equation
Mhm.
without shame, without a big deal. You give so much compassion to all of us and so much permission as well as an invitation to own our own stuff. And I think that's a rare combo. And that's why I feel very privileged and honored that you would have me as a guest again.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So I want my people to get to know you a little bit better. Something I have heard you say, whether it was you and I talking or outside somewhere, maybe on your podcast, which what's the name of your podcast again? Habits for your happily ever after.
Yes.
Yeah. You've mentioned before that you've had what I describe as 2 marriages with the same husband. Can you explain that a little bit to us and your journey to becoming a relationship coach?
I think we were so young that David was my high school sweetheart. We were in
Mm.
the Music Man together. He was the Music Man. I was Marion, the librarian. How sweet is that
That's
story?
so sweet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like all childhood sweethearts, we were on again, off again, on again, off again. And we needed to grow up.
Hmm.
And, when you grow up with your person,
Mm,
you brought all that baggage of the young person with you. And
absolutely.
so we just needed to redo our relationship. And it kind of was in phases of learning some of the things that I put into this book,
Hmm.
like learning how to make a clean ask. That's step
Hmm.
3. I wasn't making a clean ask. He is a quiet person, so he wasn't asking for anything,
Hmm.
but he was doing whatever he wanted. And and then resentments would build up or um, frustrations. And one day I realized this is just not working. And I did say to him, I said, I will always love you. This marriage is no longer working.
Hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not ready to leave our children and create a divorce situation outside of
Right.
the home.
Hmm.
But I was really clear with him. And then here's this tricky part is I actually followed through. I
Hmm.
was really polite. I never treated him badly, but I also didn't engage anymore in that intimate way. And I don't just mean sexually. I mean, I didn't share my feelings. I didn't ask to engage at that friend level.
Hmm.
And about 6 months later because it takes time for
Right.
the other person to realize, oh wow, she
She
was
means
serious.
it.
Because I
Mhm.
have to admit, Dr. Zoe, and this is one of the things I had to grow out of was I made a lot of threats and I
Mhm.
didn't follow through. And that's not a boundary, right?
No, it's not a boundary. It's a nice idea about a boundary, but making
Yeah, but
threats is not a boundary.
right. And
Yeah.
so I had to let my behavior back up what I was asking, the change that I said I won't tolerate this anymore. And luckily for me, this doesn't happen in all relationships, as you know.
Mhm.
But when I laid down my boundary, my husband kind of woke up and said,
Mm.
oh, and he came back to me and he said, I see the frustrations that you were experiencing. I don't know if you'll be able to forgive and start again, but I want you to know that from this day forward, I'm going to do my best to change.
Wow.
And then what was great, and that was the moment my heart softened because
Mhm.
man, it's amazing how much an apology softens our heart,
It
right?
is just
Oh my gosh,
recognition. Yes.
especially when somebody owns their behavior,
Right.
doesn't say, I'm sorry, but.
Right.
And then he followed through on his boundary of living up to what he had promised. And
Mm.
so we gradually came back together and we were very intentional about forming a different kind of marriage at that stage.
Wow. What a transformation.
And how lucky am I?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I think a lot of people can put that boundary down and the scary thing is your partner may not pick it up.
Mhm. Right. I'm glad that you pointed out that the boundary is the behavior. It's not words you say. Words you say just indicate to someone that you will be implementing a boundary, but the boundary happens in the behavior. And the reality is, like you said, when we make these kinds of decisions in our relationships and for ourselves, we have to make it with the knowledge that we're going to follow through regardless of how the other person responds. And that's scary and hard. And you did something really scary. You
Yeah.
didn't know necessarily that he would come back in that way.
I actually didn't think he would.
Hmm.
And I just didn't have, I knew that I was done being with
Yes.
our marriage, but I
Yes.
didn't know what that looked like for our children. And that's
Right.
why I stayed in the house. But I really did. I don't think it works unless you have energetically surrendered.
That's the word is surrender. Surrender to the outcome because you know that you have to put in that boundary for yourself and your own well-being and health. Yes.
Mhm.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What a beautiful story. And so you have learned so much, the two of you, in the process of rebuilding a healthy relationship. And you've come to this point of writing this book. But first, I have to go back to the clean ask because as I was looking through your 6 steps and you were talking about the dirty ask, I started going, oh, I need to make sure I'm not asking, like having any dirty asks. So can you tell us about I know we're skipping steps, but can you tell us about what the clean ask is and what a dirty ask looks like?
Yeah. So the clean ask is step 3,
Hmm.
but it builds on steps 1 and 2.
You
So
want to go ahead and talk about them real quickly?
just as far as they relate to the clean ask, I
Hmm.
think that'll be enough. So the first step is to overcome fear because fear pollutes your relationship and it pollutes your ask.
Right.
That's why we want to overcome the fear so
Right.
that it's not making a dirty ask. And then
Okay, go
the
ahead.
second step is to get clear because if you don't know what you want, you can't ask for it.
Absolutely not. Right.
And clarity is one of the hardest things for people in my office. I don't know about yours, but when I
Hmm.
ask, they come in saying, I want you to help me build a boundary. And I go,
Hmm.
okay, let's do it. What do you want? Um,
I don't know. I
I
know I'm
want
not
to feel
happy, but I don't know what I want.
exactly. And
Yes.
I know I want to feel better. And it's so easy to point the finger of blame. So
Right.
a dirty ask sounds like you never take the trash out.
Mm.
How come you don't kiss me anymore?
Mm.
Now, you can hear that the person asking that, wants to be kissed.
Right.
But
Right.
can you also hear that if you are on the
Blaming.
receiving end of, how come you don't kiss me anymore? That doesn't exactly inspire a kiss.
Not at all. It
Yeah,
inspires defensiveness.
it
Yeah.
inspires defensiveness because it
Yeah.
is a form of blame or shame.
Right.
And
Criticism.
it's because the asker, the dirty asker, hasn't overcome their fear. The fear is you don't love me anymore.
Mm.
Or I feel like the romance is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm afraid I've let the ball down. That
Mm.
one's a hard one to
Yeah.
admit, right?
Right. Right. I messed up somehow. I messed up this relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. So the clean ask formula is 3 steps.
Mm-hmm.
First, state your feeling. And oftentimes that does have to do with overcoming the fear, or at least just name the fear, because when you name the fear, you tame it down. And so it would sound something like, I I'm sad that we haven't been kissing like we used to.
Mm-hmm.
That's naming the feeling, kind of naming the fear. I'm afraid that we're not gonna kiss ever again, right?
Right.
And it's sometimes I'll make my clean ask full of humor and I'll say, I feel sad that we're not kissing and I'm sure it's that we're never going to kiss again,
Right.
and just
Yeah.
by bringing a little humor in as I overcome my fear, it lightens the mood.
Mm-hmm.
Second step is to state your desire.
Mm.
This is tricky because we're afraid of what we
Fear of
desire. Like,
rejection. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say, I want you to kiss me like you mean it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's scary,
It
right?
is. Yeah.
So being able to say, I'm afraid that we're not kissing much. And I'm afraid for what that means in our relationship. Step 2,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be kissers. I want to
Mm-hmm.
wake up that passion and I want to be kissers. And then the clean ask, that third step, is to ask in a way that implies yes or no from your sweetheart.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we want to have big conversations, but when you ask so cleanly that your partner can answer yes or no, what you do in that moment is you give agency to your
Mm-hmm.
sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say, do you want to be kissers with me? My sweetheart, now the ball's in their court because that
Right.
they can either say yes or no.
Yeah.
That's the part we want to avoid, Dr. Zoe. We
Oh,
want to
yeah.
avoid the yes or no.
Of
So we
course.
don't ask in a way that they can. We say, we're going to be kissing now.
Mm.
That's a dirty ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
You
especially
can,
the why. I can see why the why. And part of what you want to know also is why. But what happens is you create that defensiveness. And so you need to just ask the question. And I think it goes back to the surrender, surrendering that maybe they'll say no.
and the only promise I can give you is that the deepest intimacy I've seen both in my own relationship, but also in tons of my clients is when people are vulnerable, when they step into that surrender, the intimacy goes ka-thunk.
Mm.
It's just because if you keep holding the control,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of telling your sweetheart how they have to act in order to be in relationship to you.
Mm. Yes.
And that control, I understand it because I don't want to give that away because it's
Mm-hmm.
scary. But when you give it away and you say, do you want to kiss me? I would like to kiss you. Do you want to kiss me? Then your sweetheart gets to choose you.
Mm-hmm.
That's big.
It is big. Yeah. It's big. So I want to go. Well, as you were talking about that, I remembered something that you wrote in the book about this statement. And then I want to go back to fear of feeling like David should make the bed, right? That's part of that whole control story that we tell ourselves in relationship about what our partners should do, right?
Yes.
What?
And I have never told the make the bed story to somebody who doesn't relate, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
my husband, he couldn't give two rips about a made bed. And when we first were married, I made all these beautiful pillows. I'm like
Mm,
celebrating our life
yes,
together,
right.
and especially this like marriage bed. And I take it personally when he chooses not to make the bed. When I come into the bedroom and I'm like, the bed's not made. And he would quickly make it,
Mm-hmm.
but that was a dirty ask, right?
Mm, yes.
And when I say, how come you don't want to do this? It's not clean. Like it was clean when I said, David, what is it? What could we do? All right, let me do the three steps. Okay.
Mhm.
First step, overcome fear. I'm afraid that you don't value our marriage bed the way I value it.
Mm,
And the reason I fear that is because you don't make the bed. That's a fear of mine,
mm-hmm.
but that's on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second one, I want a made bed. I love the feeling of coming in and seeing a made bed. Here's the clean ask. What do we need to do, blankets and sheets wise, so that you would be willing to make the bed? And he goes, I didn't know you felt so personal about
Yes.
the bed. Man, you got a lot tied to this bed. And
Yes.
it was just a light bulb moment for me. I was in his business,
Mm-hmm.
deciding what he was thinking as
Right.
he wasn't making the bed.
And so
Yeah.
then the bed, not making the bed wasn't just about him being messy or not caring about your home, or it became a not caring about your marriage and your intimacy. Of that, the story that you made up. Yeah, you had a big story that wasn't true. And so when we can tell our partner what we fear and then the ask because we're explaining why that ask matters to us, all of a sudden it's a bulb moment. And I've had that experience in my relationships where I'm like, you thought that me not doing that meant that? And then we can explain, oh no, I don't care about the bed. I care about us, and my making the bed has nothing to do, or my not making the bed has nothing to do with that. But now that I know, and I think that's the most important thing, now that I know that my not making up the bed sends that message to you, I will make up that bed because I want to make sure that you feel the way that I actually intend for you to feel about me, right? And so, and even if I forget to make the bed, at least I know what it means when I forget to make the bed. And so then I can communicate that to him as well. So I love that. I love that in telling the fear, which actually makes us feel even more scared, and then
Yes.
doing the ask, we're giving our partner the opportunity to understand us better.
You have hit the nail on the head. That
Mhm.
it diffuses the story we tell ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Because when you speak the story aloud, that's the fear, right? Because
Hmm.
I had my parents divorced and I was just waiting for us to divorce. I was sure
Oh, yeah.
we were going to divorce. And I had pinned that on the made bed. I had decided that the made bed was the symbol of our marriage, and my
Oh my
husband didn't
goodness.
care about it.
Wow. Yeah.
But the instant I voiced that out loud to him, it was like all these little ghosts from my childhood were exposed and they
Mm,
disappeared.
hmm.
Because David came over the instant I gave that really clean, vulnerable ask with tears falling
Mm, yeah.
because of the fear that I'm speaking aloud. He goes, oh, sweetheart, I had no idea. I had no idea. I didn't make the bed because I don't care about a made bed. It
Right.
doesn't bother me to get into a bed that's not made up at night.
Hmm.
But Dr. Zoe, he never has missed making the bed
Mm,
once I told him that's what it meant to me.
wow.
Because
That's
it's like you said, now he understands why it's such a big deal for me. And frankly, what's so funny is the minute I saw that he didn't care, like it wasn't the same story, like my
right.
story bubble popped.
Your
I
stories
I
changed.
haven't cared about the bed in the same way.
I love it. You don't care about it in the same way, and he's sure to do it. And that is a beautiful example of love expression in a marriage.
And that's a very tiny
Hmm.
but big
Right.
example of how we started our marriage over. That
Mm.
second marriage of
Mhm.
speaking the stories so that when you name a fear, you tame it. And
Right.
then you can befriend that fear. And I could take care of the little girl inside of me that was afraid we were going to divorce. And
Hmm.
I didn't say that often to him, but I did talk to him in our marriage counselor's office
Hmm.
about, she had the brilliance to ask me, Rebecca, how old do you feel when you're
Wow,
saying
that's
these
so good.
things?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
And I went, oh, I feel about 5 years old. So
Mm.
this isn't about David.
Mm-mm.
This is about my baggage.
Hmm.
And then what's so fascinating is this, as soon as I own my baggage, David doesn't feel defensive anymore. And
Right.
he is washing me in compassion because now he doesn't feel blamed.
Right. He knows it's not about him. It's now a way that he can show his love for you. But often we blame, and then our partner becomes defensive, and then we feel even more hurt, and it just confirms for us that they don't care, and all the other stories. And so for someone out there listening, I just encourage you to think, what are my fears that have been unnamed in our relationship? What are the fears that I hold and don't speak? Because what I'm hearing from you, Rebecca, is those are the things that are sabotaging to a relationship.
They're just polluting. They're
Mhm.
polluting your relationship without you realizing it because you are so sure you are asking for what you want, but it's such a dirty ask that
Mm.
the thing you are saying is not reaching your sweetheart's ears.
So good. So good. With my couples, I always tell them, listen, when it comes to communication, it doesn't matter what you say. What matters is what's heard. And so many people double down on what they say. And I'm saying, no, you need to be double down on understanding what your partner heard you say, because that's all that matters.
Yes. And Dr. Zoe, do you remember the guest you had? His book was about we need to be right.
Oh, that was yes, I'm blank.
Yes, yes,
Corey. Yes.
yes.
It's gonna come to me. I'll put it in the show notes. Corey
Okay.
something. Yeah.
He
He's great.
He's great. And I had such an aha during that interview you had with him because this whole blame cycle that we're talking about with
Hmm.
the dirty ask, it is born out of I need to be right. If I'm not
Right.
right, I'm not worthy.
Ooh, so good. Yes.
And that just drives the fear deeper and
Hmm.
makes the ask dirtier and more
Oh
toxic.
my goodness.
And so it's surrendering that need to be right. That's why it's so important to me that when you make that clean ask, you're handing the agency to your sweetheart
Hmm.
because what you want may not be quote unquote right for your sweetheart. And they
Right.
need to be able to say, no, that doesn't work for me.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't want to make the bed. My husband could have said, and he did say, well, if you want me to make the bed, we can't have 13 pillows because
Ah,
so
okay.
then he was able to talk about, okay, all right, I'll make the bed, but I want to have 3 steps max.
Hmm.
You know, pull
Yes.
up the sheet, pull up the blanket, put 2 pillows down, done.
Done. Right. Were you
Yeah,
able to accommodate him in that?
I, I was. And I also said to myself, occasionally I go, gosh, this is such a boring bed. And then I'd go, oh, but it's made every day.
It's
And then
made.
that just reminds me
Hmm.
I could make the bed myself if I want to have 15 pillows on it.
Hmm.
But I don't like that. It's not worth it to me because I was always getting out of bed first.
First.
Yeah.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. Now I don't get out of bed first. He works a really early shift. And maybe now you've sparked this conversation. Maybe I'll report back that I added a bunch of pillows.
Added more pillows because now you can do it.
Yeah.
I love it. I know we're kind of skipping around your steps, and I'm just encouraging our listeners to get your book so they can get deeper into the steps. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was apologies,
Mhm.
because we all know that feeling of being hurt and being given a really weak apology, right? And then we also know that feeling of being hurt and then not knowing how to really apologize. And so I want to talk about, I think, that you wrote in the book about a good apology or appropriate. How would you describe that?
So this is in step 5,
Mm-hmm.
which is about affirm lovingly. And
Mm,
when you affirm your sweetheart, you're just making deposit after deposit after deposit into the bank account of your relationship, figuratively. And that way, when you do need to put a boundary down and say, this I will not do,
mm-hmm.
or I do need this, you've got a lot in the bank. And
Mm,
I talk about affirming lovingly by saying, uh, hello and goodbye are invisible moments in life. So just
right.
I'll encourage your listeners to listen to episode 8 of my podcast, Habits for Your Happily Ever After. And I tell a story about hello and goodbye and how
Mm,
just that one change changed my marriage. Um, Lots of change moments for
mm-hmm.
me. But one another affirm lovingly thing you can do is to apologize well. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason is that we are going to hurt each other. If you share a front door and a toilet with your sweetheart, you have so many opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. You will.
If you make a really good apology, it actually deepens your intimacy because
Mm,
you've been hurt. You've allowed your sweetheart to apologize. You've accepted the apology, which says, you can be a quote unquote broken person and I still love you in a whole way. So
mm,
here's the 4 steps. First, say, I'm sorry. Don't say, I'm sorry, but
but,
I'm sorry. And if you only understood, no, I'm
or I'm
sorry.
sorry you feel that way.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I hate that one, right?
Yeah,
That's like worse than not saying
yes,
anything.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's step number 1. Step 2 is to name the behavior for which you are sorry.
That's good.
I think this is where a lot of healing takes place because the person who's hurt feels seen. Yes, that is exactly the behavior that hurt me. So it's like, for example, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Step 2, I'm sorry. I didn't take out the trash, even though I had promised to do that every
Hmm.
single week. I'm
Yeah.
naming the behavior, right?
Hmm.
Step 3 is to name how you think your sweetheart feels as a result of your actions.
Right.
So I'm sorry. I promised to take out the trash and I just dropped the ball.
Hmm.
Step 3, I bet that makes you feel like I don't care about you. I bet that
Hmm.
makes you feel like you're not important enough to me to follow through on our promises.
Wow.
Can you feel how that can do some real healing?
Absolutely. They just identified not just the, or you just identified not just the thing, but also the way you imagine it made your partner feel.
Yeah.
And if someone apologized to me like that, I would feel deeply heard and understood and known.
And
Hmm.
known. And
Hmm.
that's what creates deeper intimacy. And
Right.
the 4th step is you don't just get to apologize for the behavior and name your person. You gotta, if in order to be sincere, you gotta say, I have a plan for how I'm gonna do better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I forgot to take out the trash and I had promised to do that. I bet that makes you feel like I don't value you and the promises I make to you. So I've made a change. I have now put a repeat on my calendar. Every Tuesday,
Hmm.
I'm going to check that trash and get it out to the curb. That's how I'm planning to do it going forward.
Hmm. I like to call that the do differently for my partners.
Do
Yes.
differently.
This is
Love it.
my do differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. Rebecca, this is so good. You have so many good nuggets. I mean, you always do. I feel like you are full of wisdom and you really are the best listener, which I think is one of your superpowers. But can we circle back and just quickly go through those 6 stages? We don't need to explain them. I just want to hear the 6 steps and let my listener hear those 6 steps so that they can understand what they're going to get in your book.
Okay. Thanks for saying I'm a good listener. That
You
means so
are.
much to me. It's important to me. Um, And I think it's part of good communication is listening.
Mm,
So I
yeah.
divide the book into two halves. The
Hmm.
first three steps are about giving good communication.
Hmm.
The second three steps are about receiving good
Mm,
communication. And what's interesting is just like you talk to your listeners, I talk just to the person who's reading. I don't say, and then when your sweetheart is receiving, this is what's on them. No, no, no. You are in charge both of how you give and how you receive
I love
information.
that. Yes.
So, step one is to overcome fear
Hmm.
because fear toxifies your relationship. Step two, get clear because you can't ask for something if you don't know what it is.
Hmm.
Step three is to ask cleanly for that thing instead of asking dirty. And then we go to the receiving love. Step four, beware conditions
Mm,
because your sweetheart has baggage. And
yes.
when your sweetheart says things to you, don't accept the blame that might be tossed your direction. Instead, notice, oh, my partner is sort of giving me a signal. I'll love you if da 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 da, or I'll love you when you take out the trash.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm lovable and worthy right now.
Mm.
That's beware conditions. Don't receive something that is conditional love. Step
So is
five,
that something you say to yourself when you start to get that sense? You have to just remind yourself, I'm lovable as I am, not if I do.
exactly.
Okay.
And I have a lot of practices in that
Hmm.
chapter about how to cultivate worthiness in ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure this is the same for you in your practice. When we boil down the pain our clients are feeling, it's like, I'm not enough or I'm not worthy.
Yeah,
Those are our two big fears.
right.
So when you can work on your worthiness, and we are all worthy because we were born,
Mm, yes.
you would say to your listeners, you are a child of God. You are worthy because God doesn't make mistakes.
Yes. Oh, I
Uh,
love
yeah. So beware conditions. Then step five is affirm lovingly.
that. Hmm.
Because when you put, we have a negativity bias that kept us alive when the saber-toothed tigers were
Right.
chasing us. Doesn't serve us in marriage. And so
Hmm.
want to go looking for the good,
Mm.
name it, and keep the fire of that goodness tended.
Go looking for the good. That is such a great reminder in
Yeah,
communication and relationships. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And one of my big strategies in that chapter is to make the invisible visible. I
Hmm.
was just talking to somebody who said, the first year of our marriage, I made my wife coffee every morning, and every morning she thanked me. And then something happened, and I kept making coffee, but she stopped thanking me. And I
Oh,
could hear his pain. And
wow.
that's just, and that happens to all of us. We stop seeing what we already
Mhm.
have.
We take it for granted. Yes. And
Yeah.
we don't realize how important that thank you is, the power that it has and the legs that it has in our relationship. Yeah.
Yes. And the invisible moments of how we talk to each other. Are there those kind, like when you walk in the door, is your sweetheart lost in their phone and they go, hi, but they stay
Hmm.
lost in their phone? That
Hmm.
doesn't feel like hello.
No, it
Feels
doesn't.
kind of like stay away.
It does. It feels kind
Yep.
of like this is more important than you are.
Yep.
Yes.
And then that final step, step six, is build boundaries.
Mm.
And like I said earlier in our conversation, most people walk into my office as a relationship coach saying, I want to learn to build boundaries. And I wrote this book to say a really good boundary that magnifies the love in your relationship is built on the back of these first five steps.
I love that.
Because when you have a clean ask, you have an agreement. That's the beginning of a boundary. And most people completely skip that step. They just assume, well, I don't want you to treat me that way. So I'm going to give you the cold shoulder whenever you do. And that's my boundary.
No,
Oh,
cold shoulders are not boundaries.
no. And it's just destroying your love.
Right. Yes. So thank you for going through those 6 steps, and I can't wait to dive into them deeper. So I have to ask because I have a number of clients who are, and mostly women, who are in a position of, Dr. Zoe, I'm done trying in my marriage. I don't think he's ever going to change. I don't think it's even possible. I just want to figure out. And I'm not going to divorce. There have many reasons why they don't want to end this relationship. I just want to figure out how to survive. How can I just survive this marriage? And so I'm asking for some advice from you. What would you say to a woman who is in that place? And, she listens to my podcast and she may or may not pick up your book because she's not that invested anymore and even trying. What would you have to say to her?
Hmm. Oh, wow. I think I would want to know why are you staying?
Mm.
Why are you staying? If it feels like your marriage has died, why are you staying? And what would you guess your clients would say?
Honestly, I think they would say financial reasons. They would
Okay.
say kids,
Yeah,
family, not wanting to break up the family. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna take you at your word
Mhm.
that this woman is looking to stay and she wants to say, okay, how can I be happy? So I'm gonna invite that woman right now. I'm gonna say to you, begin to look at how you can live your deepest, most fulfilling life inside this marriage.
Mhm.
Don't treat your husband with respect and kindness, but don't invest yourself there. Instead, invest in you and invest in what brings you excitement. A lot of women in that position have completely forgotten what makes them
Mm.
happy.
Yeah.
I have this tool I start women like that out with called the Bliss Basket, and I learned
Hmm.
this from Martha Beck.
Hmm.
Great book, Finding Your Own North Star, where
Love it.
you honestly put a basket by your door, by your bed, in your car, and in that basket, you put things that make you feel filled up,
Mm.
excited. So my bliss basket has colored pencils. It
Hmm.
has a straw because I like to drink out of a straw.
I
It
love it.
it has yarn or something soft.
Hmm.
And it's just things that remind me I can choose to do something that practices happiness for myself. Where do you think I'm off with this answer for your client who's frustrated?
I don't think you're off at all. I think that's a beautiful invitation to remember her own needs, her own desires, and that they matter. I wonder, so as you're talking, I was thinking, and I wonder how these steps could help even her in this
Well,
space.
well, because she will learn to ask cleanly for
Right,
what she wants.
right.
And what the magic of the clean ask, even when your sweetheart doesn't give you what you want, is that now you have kind of named it without blame. You have asked for what you wanted. Your sweetheart has said no. And now there's no need for covert behavior anymore. There's no need for punishment.
Mm,
Just go, okay, my sweetheart doesn't want to give me that. And the pain that we feel lives in that place of staying attached to what we wish we had instead of even in a relationship just with yourself, you can surrender and say, he doesn't want to give that to me. So let me look at, he's giving me financial stability.
hmm.
We are able to raise these children in the same home. Those are things that I value and I want.
Right.
So I'm gonna focus on that being the thing that connects us. Marriage a century ago, that's all marriage
That
was.
was the purpose. Yes. Hmm. Right.
So so maybe you just say, okay, I am grateful. And I have a story in this book. Do we have time for me to tell
Yeah.
one more?
Tell
Okay.
it.
I have a story in this book because my husband is a physician. He makes a great living.
Hmm.
Don't make a lot of money in our family.
Hmm.
And for years, I felt unworthy.
Yeah.
And I have a whole story about my transformation in that regard. But one thing that I did to help me is I began thanking him for the money that he earned
Mm.
because that was threatening to me.
Wow.
And yet he was supporting us. And I
Yeah.
wasn't like owning it. And
Yes.
so I would just, as he left in the morning, I'd say, "Hey, thanks for going to work. Thanks for going to work." And then sometimes I would say, "Thanks for going to work because the lights are staying on. Thanks for going to work because I got to grocery shop and buy whatever I wanted at the grocery store. Thanks for going to work and those new sneakers I just bought." And I
Hmm.
and then I named thing after thing. And then one day this these words fell out of my mouth. I said, "Hey, thanks for going to work so that I can just have freedom to write as much as I want."
Mm.
And I ran to the bathroom as he left. And I just started sobbing these buckets of tears
Wow.
because I had never owned the privilege I had that he
Hmm.
was paying the bills.
Hmm.
And it was embarrassing to me because I didn't feel like I was worthy if all I did was I was the wifey who wrote.
Mm.
That didn't sit well with me. But then I made friends with my privilege.
Wow. And
And
your fear. You made friends with your privilege and your fear. Yes.
yeah, because my fear was tied up in my privilege. My
Exactly.
fear
Yeah.
was I'm not worthy if I'm not earning on my own.
Right.
So I'm gonna kind of,
Downplay.
yes,
Yeah.
downplay his contribution. And the second that I ingested how much his contribution was allowing me to have the life I wanted, then suddenly I felt a gratitude toward him
Mm.
I hadn't felt before.
That is
Yeah.
so beautiful. That goes back to finding the good, right? Finding, yes, that good. And as you were sharing the story and even talking about the the clean ask, I just had an experience, and this was not in a relationship, but this was in business of needing to ask for something more business stuff and being fearful of doing it, probably about that whole worthiness aspect. And in that meeting, I asked for the thing that I wanted and felt that I deserved. And I walked away from that meeting, didn't get an answer, not yet, still don't have the answer. It's coming. But I walked away from that meeting with the feeling of, I'm so proud of you, Zoe. You asked. You didn't let your fear keep you from stating the thing that you needed to state, regardless of the outcome. I'm so proud that you asked. And so, even in a relationship, and I've had experiences like that in relationships as well, s- just the asking is actually more important often than the answer because
I
that's you affirming yourself.
I couldn't agree with you more because what you said, I mean, you used the word because I think I deserve this thing in business. If
Hmm.
you want something, I don't even think deserve is a word
Mm.
we should use, especially as women. We
Right.
we are told we don't deserve.
Absolutely.
So let's just banish the word
Let's
deserve.
get rid of it. Yes.
If you want something,
Hmm.
you get to ask.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're going to get it, but the respect you felt in that moment when you asked, you were
Hmm.
so proud of yourself.
I was.
This little child inside of you that was like, "Thank you for standing up for me," right? We all have
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly. I love that, Rebecca. Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to that woman in that difficult place.
I want you to know that I know that woman. And
Mm,
that's why I said, I think our marriage is over, but I'm not going to leave this house.
right. Right. You spoke the fearful, scary thing. You spoke it.
Yeah. And then I think there was some freedom for me when I spoke it that I didn't need to be mean anymore. I wasn't
Mm,
I wasn't mad anymore about all the things he wasn't giving me that I wanted for our marriage
mm,
because I let the marriage die. I let those expectations die. And then I turned my eyes on myself. Okay, Rebecca, what do you want? What are
Yeah,
you gonna, all that energy that you were pouring into Dave, pour it into yourself. What do you want? And I began writing in earnest at that point in my life. Yeah.
that's so beautiful.
Isn't it cool?
It is. It's really cool. It's
Because I found my own life. And in fairness to Dave, one of the things that he said at that moment in our relationship, he was so frustrated with how much I was micromanaging him. At one point he turned
Mhm.
to me and he said, "Just get a life of your own."
Wow.
How true.
I'm
And he
sure that must have been painful to hear. Yes, I think of how painful that must have been, but how freeing
Yeah, because he
ultimately.
spoke the truth.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
spoke that brave truth, which was, this is not a marriage. You're sucker fishing on me.
Hmm.
You're the
Hmm.
leech.
Yeah.
You are finding your purpose in my purpose
Mm.
instead of finding your own purpose.
Hmm.
And in fairness to all women, because we tend the home fires more often,
Yep.
our purpose often is the family.
Hmm.
And when a man, if he's in that role of not tending, when he appreciates that role, magic happens.
Mm.
But when he doesn't appreciate it, I could still appreciate what I gave to our family. I
Right.
didn't need Dave to validate that I was doing a good thing.
That's so, so powerful.
Yeah. And so hard
Mm. Yes. So hard, which is why we have these conversations.
to remind each other
Hmm.
because we all know these things. And yet it's so easy for me to give it to you and you to give it to me
Hmm.
and both of us to give it to this client of yours, but to give it to ourselves, oh, that's harder.
It is. It is. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you for coming on, for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for writing this book. Can you tell my listeners, well, some of the offerings that you have in addition to the book? Obviously, they can go on Amazon and buy 6 Steps to Better Marriage Communication, but you also have, what do you have? Some classes, programs?
I don't have any classes running right now, but I will probably in the second half of 2025. So I would recommend that people join my newsletter,
Hmm.
RebeccaMullenCoaching.com, and just press that little button that says join my newsletter or whatever
Hmm.
it says. Because in 2025, I'm offering some free coaching there only for email subscribers. We're going to do,
Okay.
I'm finding some projects just because you know how it is. I want to hear right from the horse's mouth, what are my clients struggling with? And so I'm
Right.
going to offer some free coaching so
Oh,
I
that's
can
fantastic.
hear those struggles. Um, so that's one thing. Another thing is I'm new to TikTok.
Oh, you're on
And so,
TikTok.
yeah. And so you can find me at Rebecca Mullen Coaching on TikTok and those little 60 seconds that I offer almost daily to give you a little tip or encouragement on your relationship communication.
I love that. I will be rushing to subscribe to your TikTok account.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you on TikTok, Zoe?
I am on there, but very
Not really. Yeah.
inconsistent. But I do have a presence. Yes, it's
Okay.
on there.
Okay,
I'll
cool.
I'll connect with you and you'll see.
That sounds good. Thank you for having me, for including me in your gorgeous community. You have built
Mm.
such a beautiful place for people to feel safe as they examine how they can grow.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I hope that people come over to your podcast as well.